राधे।
प्रथमं सद्गुरुं वन्दे श्रीकृष्णं तदनन्तरं गुरुः पापात्मना त्राता श्रीकृष्णस्त्वमलात्मना मन्नाथः श्रीजगन्नाथं मद्गुरुः श्रीजगद्गुरुः मदात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। नमः कमलनाभाय नमः कमलमालिने नमः कमलपादाय नमस्ते कमलेक्षण यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तद्ग्वं देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। Seekers of divine bliss, let us chant for a few minutes, and thereafter we will continue on from where we left off. वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, वृंद बरसा वारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसान वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
नंद नंदन बनवारी
जय हो
जय जय, भोरी भानु दुलारी की जय जय।
नंद नंदन बनवारी की जय जय, भोरी भानु दुलारी की जय जय।
नंद नंदन बनवारी
नंदन बनवारी की जय जय, भोरी भानु दुलारी की जय जय।
वृंदावन
जय हो
बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
वृंदा विपिन बिहारी की जय जय, बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
ओ बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
बरसाने वारी प्यारी की जय जय।
बोले बरसाने वारी की जय, लाडली लाल की जय, श्रीमद सतगुरु सरकार की जय। Yesterday, we discussed about the entity known as the Guru, and it was explained how absolutely necessary it is to have a Guru in the process of God realization. And some light was also shed on the fact that the scriptures are full of examples of saints performing delusive actions, misleading actions. They pretend to be deluded by Maya. You were told the mystery behind it, the cause behind it. God and saints possess the power Yog Maya, Yog plus Maya, which allows them to remain in their divine state, in their naturality, and at the same time perform all works of Maya. The Ramayana also tells us that although God and saints are beyond the realm of Maya, but nevertheless they act like worldly beings when they descend on earth. And this acting is solely for the redemption of the world. It is for the benefit of the worldly souls like ourselves, whether or not we comprehend the reason behind their actions or not. And you were told that there are various paths leading to God. What will the Guru and the saints tell us as to which path we must follow? And most importantly, which path is the most suitable and the simplest path to follow. So let us begin on today's topic. The scriptures tell us that there are three main paths leading to God: the path of action, Karma Yoga, the path of knowledge, Gyan Yoga, and the path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga. What is the difference between the three? And which among these paths is the most suitable for us, the easiest and the simplest to follow, and more importantly, which will lead us to our final destination? So first of all, let us differentiate between Bhakti Yoga and Gyan Yoga, the path of devotion and the path of knowledge. A Gyan Yogi is one who worships God with the aim to merge into Him, as a river merges into the ocean. losing its identity once and for all. Furthermore, it should be known and remembered that only one who is completely detached from the world and who is completely purified at heart already, who qualifies for the path of Gyan Yoga. In other words, it is extremely difficult to qualify for this path. To qualify for Bhakti Yoga, on the other hand, one need not be too detached nor attached to the world. Therefore, it is much easier for us to qualify for the path of devotion. Furthermore, to compare the two, as the Gyan Yogi walks on his path, he faces a constant danger of falling down, since he relies only on his strength and efforts to walk on the path, and thus he is not protected by God. On the other hand, for a devotee, there's no question of falling down, because God, as he practices devotion and surrenders to God, God himself protects him at every step of the way. He takes care of him. And finally, even those Gyan Yogis who have attained the impersonal Brahma, that is God without name and form, are forcibly attracted to the personal God who has a definite name and form. The scriptures give us examples, they explain through logic, and the examples of these topmost Gyanis, such as Janak, Shukdev, Vedavyas, Uddhav, Shankaracharya, etc., who were forcibly attracted to the personal God, although they had already attained the bliss of the impersonal Brahma. So in other words, although God is one, and he has two forms, Sagun, Savishesh, Sakar, Roop, the personal form of God, worshipped by the bhaktas, the devotees, and the impersonal Brahm, Nirgun, Nirvishesh, Nirakar Roop, God without name and form, worshipped by the Gyanis. Shankaracharya has also accepted that it is extremely, in fact, impossible in this age to qualify for the path of Gyan Yoga. Murtam chaiva murtam dveva brahmano rupe ityupanishatayorva dvau bhaktau bhagavadupadishtau kleshadakleshadva mukti syade tayor madhye. Shankaracharya. On the other hand, let us understand in this way that although the individual soul, the individual soul is an eternal fraction of God, yet there's a unique bliss experienced in loving devotion to God and keeping a separate identity, like in the case of a devotee. And this bliss cannot be experienced in merging into him, like in the case of a jnani. There used to be a tradition in India that if they were sitting in the midst of elders and other family members, a new bride and her groom would not look at one another openly. The bride's face would be partially covered by her veil, and she would shyly gaze at her husband from behind her veil. She was very careful not to let anyone see her glancing at her husband, and would lower her eyes after every quick glance. This is a unique pleasure experienced in this way by the bride, which is absent even in talking and meeting freely with the husband. In the Ramayana, we read that when Ram, Sita, Lakshman were passing through a village during their 14-year-long exile period, the women of the village asked Sita ji about the two men accompanying her. At this, Sita ji pointed to Lakshman and replied in a normal way that he was her brother-in-law. But when she was asked to identify the other gentleman, what did she do? She was silent. Khanjana manju tirche nanana nij pati kahe uti nahi siya sanana. Her shy demeanor, shy behavior was indication enough of her relationship with Lord Ram and lowered eyes. Now you may wonder, but why did Sita ji just not tell them straight out that he was her husband? But you see, there's a unique visual pleasure in her shyness and in the way she hid her face with the edge of her sari in the form of a reply. This is just to give you an idea. So this is a unique bliss of devotion experienced by the devotee through all the senses, and this bliss is not available to the jnani. Now let us talk a little bit about Karma Yoga. Where does that lead us? Gaurang Mahaprabhu, as you know, who was also known as Lord Chaitanya, was the descension of God. And who appeared on this earth in Navadvip, India, a little over 500 years ago, in 1486 to be exact. He was God himself in the human form and the very embodiment of bhakti, devotion. His humility was legendary, historical. Often he would fall at the feet of his own devotees, begging them for their grace. Once, he asked Ramanand Rai, his own devotee and disciple, who was a very learned scholar of the Vedas and other scriptures as well. Gaurang Mahaprabhu asked him, what is the duty of every human being? In answer, Ramanand Rai quoted from the Gita, Swe swe karmanya bhirataha sansiddhim labhate naraha. 1845. He said every human being must observe, must perform his individual duty. Now, remember that, just to remind you, that Gaurang Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya, was not only the greatest of Sanskrit scholars of his time, but he was the descension of God himself. He was the descension of, in fact, Shri Radha Rani herself. And he's having this discussion of the scriptures with his most intimate devotee, Ramananda Rai. Why? So that we, ordinary beings, may also learn about our ultimate duty in life. So Gaurang Mahaprabhu replied, yes, you are right, Ramanand. Every human being must perform his duty. And yet he added, but the performance of moral and worldly duties, religious duties, can only lead one to Swarga, the celestial abode. He said, tell me of a higher duty. And as I explained, that the pleasures of Swarglok are only limited and they're also temporary. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, tell me of a higher duty. This time, again, Ramanand Rai, quoting from the Gita, said, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braj. 1866 Gita. Renounce all worldly duties and obligations and take refuge in God alone, as Lord Krishna told Arjuna to do. Surrender to Him alone. However, Gaurang Mahaprabhu said, this teaching is only for those who do not possess true knowledge. You see, these words were spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjuna at the time when Arjuna was afraid of fighting the battle due to fear of incurring sin by killing his elders and teachers. So he was just trying to protect himself from not committing sin. So there's Gaurang Mahaprabhu said to his disciple, Ramanand Rai, tell me of a higher, take me to an even greater stage and tell me about the duty of one who possesses true knowledge already. This time Ramanand Rai said, Brahma bhutah prasannatma na shochati na kankshati samah sarva bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate param. Samah sarveshu bhuteshu, etc. 1854. Ramanand Rai replied, one who possesses true knowledge, that is one who views everyone impartially, who does not grieve or rejoice, who remains ever the same internally in happiness and sorrow, such an individual who has attained such perfect knowledge must attain devotion to God. Even he must attain bhakti, devotion. So this proves that out of the three paths leading to God, the path of works, karma yoga, the path of action, which is the path of action, jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, and bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. The path of devotion occupies the highest position. The Vedas also state, उपनिषद रूपी धनुष पर उपासना का बाण चढ़ाओ और भावपूर्ण चित्त के द्वारा उस बाण को खींचकर परमात्मा में मन लगाकर उसे प्राप्त करो. What does this mean? It means string the arrow of devotion on the bow of the Upanishads and then using this knowledge take aim at fixing the mind on God and thereby attaining Him. Bhakti revainam nayati, bhakti revainam pashyati, bhakti revainam darshayati, bhakti vashaha purushaha, bhakti reva bhuyasi. Matar Shruti also tells us that bhakti ही हमें अपने अंतिम लक्ष्य तक ले जाने वाली है. भक्ति से ही उस ईश्वर को कोई देख सकता है, जान सकता है, उसका स्पर्श आदि कर सकता है, उसका अनुभव कर सकता है. और भक्ति के वश में स्वयं भगवान हैं, रहते हैं. और भक्ति ही सबसे बड़ी चीज़ है. It is through devotion that one can attain its ultimate goal, and it is only through devotion that one can see Him, hear Him, and experience Him with all the senses. And it is bhakti itself that God comes under the control of His own supreme power, bhakti. Such is the magic spell of bhakti. And therefore bhakti is the greatest thing. Bhakti reva bhuyasi, Matar Shruti says. And what does the Bhagavatam tell us? Just as fire burns away all impurities from gold and restores it to its original pure form, in the same way devotion to God washes away, burns away, washes away all impurities of the mind. Bhaktyahamekaya grahiyah Shraddhayatma priyah satam. Bhagavad 11:14-21. God himself says in the Bhagavad, I can be attained only through devotion. And further we read, Lord Kapil tells his mother Devahuti in the Bhagavatam as well. He instructs her on the path of devotion. He tells her that the greatest achievement of a human being, the greatest thing a human being can achieve, in other words, is to unite his mind with God through devotion. The Lord Krishna also says in the Gita, Bhaktya tvananyaya shakya ahamevam vidhorjuna gyatum drashtum cha tattvena praveshtum cha param tapa. 11:54. If you want to know me, if you want to see me, you want to have my vision, drashtum, or you want to merge into me, you want to become one with me, there's only one way. The only possible way is through bhakti, devotion. And Narad Bhakti Sutra also says, Trisatyasya bhakti reva gariyasi, bhakti reva gariyasi. Devotion is supreme in the past, present, and future. Tasmat saiva grahya mumukshubhihi. Narad Bhakti Sutra further says, therefore, one who wishes to be liberated from this material world must practice devotion to God. We read also in the Adi Puran, Naham vasami vaikunthe yoginam hirdayena cha madbhakta yatra gayanti tatra tishtami narad. I do not easily dwell in the hearts of the yogis, nor do I take great pleasure in residing in my own divine abode. So where does God reside? He says, if you want to find me, then look for me where my devotees are chanting my names. So you understand that all the scriptures, the Puran, the Gita, the Bhagavad, the Ramayana, recommend devotion to God. Bhakti is the marg. So now let us take a look at devotion in depth. As you know, God is one, but He has countless names, forms, and powers. Nothing of God is finite or limited. The Vedas refer to Him as Anant, or infinite. Anantaschatma Vishwarupo Hyakarta. Shvetashvataropanishad 1:9. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahm. And yet, out of the innumerable powers of God, the scriptures refer to three main ones. The Chaitanya Charitamrita refers to three main ones, and they are Krishner Ananta Shakti Tate Tin Pradhan Chit Shakti Maya Shakti Jeev Shakti Na Antaranga Bahiranga Tatastha Kahi Jare Antaranga Swarup Shakti Sabar Upare. Meaning, out of the innumerable powers of God, the three main ones are Chit Shakti, Jeev Shakti, and Maya Shakti. We, the individual souls, we arise from Jeev Shakti, but we are overpowered by Maya Shakti. On the other hand, Chit Shakti, or which is also called Swarup Shakti of God, which is also known as Antarang Shakti, the most personal, most internal power of God. It has many names. It's also called Yog Maya Shakti, Para Shakti, Vaishnavi Shakti, etc. So that is the Surup Shakti of God. And that is called the Antaranga Shakti, the personal potency of God. The Jeev Shakti, on the other hand, is referred to as Tatastha, the marginal power. Why? Because although it's a fraction of God, yet it is under the control of Maya Shakti. So Jeev Shakti is referred to marginal power, Tatastha, and Maya Shakti is known as Bahiranga Shakti, the external power of God. And this threefold classification of powers is mentioned in the Vishnu Puran and other scriptures as well. So out of these three potencies, powers of God, the Surup Shakti or Chit Shakti of God is the most intimate power of God. And even this most intimate power, called Surup Shakti, is of three types: Sandhani, Samvit, and Haladani. As you know, God has three aspects: Sat, Chit, and Anand. Hence, He is known as Satchidanand. In other words, even the most intimate power of God, Surup Shakti or Chit Shakti, is of three types: Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat, as you know, means immortal existence. Chit is unlimited knowledge, and Anand, supreme bliss. In other words, even the most intimate power, Surup Shakti, is of three types, Satchit and Anand. So the Surup Shakti of God, in other words, in its Sat aspect, it is known as Sandhani. In its Chit aspect, it is known as Samvit. And in its Anand aspect, it is referred to as Haladani Shakti. And this Haladani Shakti is the bliss-giving power of God, bliss-giving potency. It is through this Haladani Shakti that God Himself remains ever blissful, in spite of noting down all our thoughts, actions, and desires of each and every individual soul, residing in each and every universe, existing in this creation, and thereafter rewarding or punishing each and every individual soul accordingly. So it is through Haladani Shakti, He Himself remains blissful, and He also makes other individual souls blissful as well. He gives the same bliss to His devotees, to the saints. And furthermore, out of the three aspects, that is Sat, Chit, and Anand, the Anand aspect is the highest, since it includes both Sat and Chit within it, immortality and perfect knowledge within it. Why do we desire immortality? Why do we wish to live forever? For the sake of happiness. Why do we desire knowledge? To be happy. It makes us happy. So in this way, the Anand aspect is the highest. In other words, this Haladani Shakti, which is the bliss-giving potency of God, which is the most intimate aspect of the most intimate power of God, called Surup Shakti, that is, when you extract the essence of this Haladani Shakti, the essence is what is called bhakti or devotion. Haladani saransh tar prem naam, Chaitanya Chaitavali. So you understand that bhakti or devotion is the most intimate of the most intimate power of God. It's the most personal power of God. And God is very reluctant. Devotees tell us, they remark amusingly, and they taunt that the fact that God is very reluctant, hesitant to grant this devotion, this bhakti, even to His surrendered devotees. And avoids doing it as far as possible. We have the example in the Ramayana, we read in the Ramayana. Lord Ram tells Kagbashundi ji, he says, I am very pleased with you. Ask for anything that you desire. But at the same time, he very cleverly suggests liberation, moksha, as the most perfect attainment. Kagbashundi manguvar ati prasanna mohi jaan animadik siddhi aparnidhi moksha sakal sukh khan. He said, take anything, take all these siddhis, these powers. I have uncountable powers, countless powers. Anima, garima, lagima, etc. Or take even moksha, the highest, the most perfect attainment, mukti. But we know that mukti is in fact not the most perfect attainment. Let me explain. You see, in reality, liberation or mukti means the absence of both sorrows as well as happiness. So liberation means not only the absence of sorrows, but the absence of happiness as well. In liberation, what happens? The individual soul is merged into the Supreme Soul. And what that means is that his inner self, which experiences happiness and pain, is destroyed forever. So there's no question of experiencing anything once a soul has attained liberation, once he has merged into God. For example, if we think of God to be a rasgulla, a sweet, then the soul that attains liberation becomes a part of that rasgulla. He becomes the rasgulla, and therefore is not able to taste its sweetness. The devotee, on the other hand, always retains a separate identity, and therefore is able to taste its sweetness. The sweetness of God. This is why devotion is much more preferable, more desirable than liberation. However, the scriptures also tell us, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu says, that bhakti cannot be easily attained. Why? So why is God so hesitant in granting this devotion, even to his devotees, to his fully surrendered devotees? Lord Krishna himself tells us in the Bhagavatam, Aham bhakta paradhino yaswatantra ivadvij sadhu bhirgrasta hirdayo bhaktair bhakta janapriyah. 9th canto, 4th chapter, 63rd verse. Shri Krishna says, I am absolutely independent. I don't depend on anybody. And yet, the magic word known as bhakti binds me and makes me dance like a puppeteer makes a puppet dance. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad, it is stated, Nirpeksham munim shantam nirvairam samadarshanam aham anubrajamyaham nityam puye yetyang hrirenubhi. 11, 14, 16 Bhagavad. Meaning that God walks behind his devotees. You may say, because you may think to protect them. No, not to protect them. To be blessed with the dust of their feet. He loves his devotees so much. So this is the reason why God is so hesitant to grant this devotion even to his devotees, because once he gives it, once he grants it, he himself becomes the eternal servant of his own devotees. Such is the magical spell of his own supreme power. called Prema Shakti or Bhakti. This supreme power has even the great Gyanis, the self-realized souls, under its magic spell. And yet the supreme gift of God is so difficult to attain that the Bhagavatam tells us, Muktanam api siddhanam narayana parayana sudurlabha prashantatma kotishvapi mahamune. 6:14:4 Bhagavat, meaning that barely one among millions of liberated souls manages to attain it. And how do they attain it? Through self-effort? No. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu says, even great personalities such as Shanak, Dhruv, even the eternally self-realized souls, the topmost Gyanis, the four sons of Brahma, Sanak, Sanandan, Sanatan, and Sanat Kumar. Even these great personalities were able to taste the nectar of devotion only how? Through their own effort? No, only through the grace of a Rasik saint. A Rasik saint means one who has attained the divine love, the divine bliss of Shri Krishna. So you understand, when even the greatest self-realized souls, the Paramahansas, who are ever immersed, who are ever engrossed in the bliss of the impersonal Brahm, are unable to attain devotion without the grace of a saint, without the grace of a guru, then how can we hope to attain it on our own? The Ramayana says, Bhav sahit khojai jo prani, pav bhakti mani sab sukh khani. Bhav sahit khojat jo prani. When an individual seeks it sincerely from the bottom of his heart, he succeeds in attaining that precious gem of love, precious gem of devotion called bhakti. However, Naraji tells us, Labhyate cha tat kripayaiva. The grace of a saint is an absolute must. Ave, the word ave means only. Devotion can be acquired only through a saint's grace. No amount of spiritual effort or practice, no tap, karma, yog, bal, ityadi, no sadhan, in other words, can produce any result without that grace, without his grace. And yet, the Narad Bhakti Sutra also tells us that it is extremely difficult to come into contact with a saintly soul and benefit from his holy association. That the association of a true saint is a very rare occurrence. It happens scarcely. Mahat sangastu durlabho mogho gamyascha. Narad Bhakti Sutra. What does this mean? Does this mean that the guru or the saint is whimsical? He's full of whims, he does as he pleases? He's biased or he's partial? Why does he shower his grace on some and not on others? Why does he bless some souls abundantly with his divine and loving holy association and not so much on others? He does not shower the same grace. What is the basis for this discrimination? The Bhagavad gives us the answer. Bhaktya tvananyaya shakya ahamevam vidhorjuna. There's another shloka in the Bhagavatam, 11.331. You can look it up. It's in the Bhagavad, 11th canto. Bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya vibhratyut pulakam tanum. This is the one. And it means, what does this mean? Vedavyas tells us that devotion begets devotion. In other words, devotion can only be attained through devotion. Bhakti करने से ही भक्ति मिलती है. इसका मतलब ये हुआ. So devotion can be attained. It means that there are two types of devotion. दो प्रकार की भक्ति होती है. One devotion is a devotion that has to be practiced by us, and the other is that which we acquire, which we attain through the saint's grace. In fact, the scriptures tell us that the saints tell us there are 10 types of devotion. And they are sadhan bhakti, bhav bhakti, sneh bhakti, prem bhakti, sneh bhakti, man bhakti, pranay bhakti, rag bhakti, anurag bhakti, bhavavesh bhakti, and mahabhav bhakti. So among these, the two types of devotion we have to practice are the first two, that is sadhana bhakti and bhav bhakti. The rest of them, from prema bhakti to mahabhav bhakti, will be attained by us through the grace of a saint, through the grace of our Guru. These 8 types of devotion from prema bhakti onwards are attained, in other words, in a state of perfection after God realization or upon God realization. And for this reason, they are given the name of Siddha Bhakti, perfect devotion. On the other hand, Sadhana Bhakti and Bhav Bhakti are the preliminary stages of devotion. So on this basis, we can divide all 10 kinds of devotion into 2 categories. The first is Sadhana Bhakti or preparatory devotion, and the other is Siddha Bhakti or perfect devotion. So we don't have to be concerned about Siddha Bhakti at this point, but our concern is how to get there, how to attain Siddha Bhakti. So that is our real concern. So how will we attain this Siddha Bhakti or perfect love or perfect devotion or perfect bliss? That is the question. The Ramayan tells us, Man krama vachan chhadi chaturai bhajatahi kripa karat raghurai. By continuously practicing sadhana bhakti, preliminary devotion, we will one day attain this Siddha Bhakti, perfect devotion, with the grace of God and the saint, the Guru. You see, a constant practice of devotion will result in the purification of our heart. And that, the purification of the heart, is the essential condition for acquiring, for attaining that perfect divine love. As the Ramayan tells us, Nirmal man jan so mohi pava, mohi kapat chhal chhidra na bhava. Saral swabhav na man kutilai, jatha labh santosh sadai. The Ramayan says, only the pure-hearted souls can attain it. Only the tender-hearted souls. So the heart has to be purified. And the quickest way that our heart can be purified, as the saints tell us, as the scriptures tell us, the Bhagavad tells us, यथा यथात्मा परिमृज्यते सहु मत्पुण्यगाथा श्रवणाभिधानैः तथा तथा पश्यति वस्तु सूक्ष्मं चक्षुर्यथैवाञ्जनसम्प्रयुक्तम्. Bhagavad 11:14-26. Bhagavad explains that just as collyrium, kajal, in India it's medicated, so just as collyrium washes away the impurities of the eyes and helps us see even small objects more clearly, in the same way, tears of devotion wash away the impurities of the mind and lead us towards God. Tears will wash our heart and purify it. Gaurang Mahaprabhu has also emphasized this point. Nayanam galadarshu dharaya vadanam gadgad ruddhaya gira pulakair nichitam vapuh kada tavanam agrahane bhavishyati. He says that the sign of love, the sign of true love for God is Nayanam Galadashu Dharaya, a stream of tears flowing from the eyes and a voice choked with loving emotion. There should be so much love in your heart when you chant that words should not be able to come out of your mouth. Furthermore, you should experience goosebumps all over the body. To attain this kind of love, we have to practice devotion. And the greatest help in practicing devotion, especially in Kali Yuga, is the loud chanting of His names, forms, qualities, pastimes, abodes, and associates. And this chanting, as you know, is called Sankirtan. We must sing in a loud voice the bhajans and kirtans that glorify God. Tulsidas Ji has also proclaimed Sankirtan to be the only base of devotion in Kali Yuga. He says that there are other means of liberation in the other ages, but in Kali Yuga, there's only one means of liberation, and that is through Sankirtan. Kali Yuga Yoga na yagya na jnana ek adhar naam gun gana. Kali Yuga keval hari gun gaha गावत नर पावहि भवथाहा. येहि कलिकाल न साधन दूजा जोग न जप तप व्रत मख पूजा. राम ही सुमिरिय गाय राम ही संतत सुनिय राम गुण ग्राम ही. And what are the means to do this Sankirtan? How should we do this Sankirtan? Let me just briefly give you a few guidelines as told in our scriptures. We must find a private place away from everyone else where you must find a private spot away from everyone else where you can sit down to practice devotion. So privacy is one, where you will not be disturbed easily. And after that, the scriptures and sayings, you must chant in a loud voice. Oh, first of all, before we start the chanting, have Shri Krishna, have the form, your deity of worship, Shri Krishna, stand in front of you. In other words, enclose the divine form of Shri Krishna in your mind and meditate on Him. And then think of Him to be your master and yourself as His servant. Because As Gaurang Mahaprabhu has said, Jeever Swarup hai Krishner Nitya Das. Being a fraction of God, being a part and parcel of God, it is the nature, it is our true nature, the nature of the individual soul to serve Him. Regardless of which relationship you establish with God, the feeling of servitude should be present when you practice devotion. And thirdly, we must chant the names, forms, qualities, pastimes, and abodes, as I mentioned before, in a loud voice. And most importantly, this chanting must be equipped with meditation on Sri Krishna's divine form. This is called Rup Dhyan. And the most important thing to remember while meditating on Him is to have Him standing in front of you, not as a statue or as an inert object, but as a living personality. Have Him walk around. Imagine that He's walking about here and there. Then He stops walking. Now He just stands there. Now He's looking at you. His eyes are filled with infinite love for you. He's smiling ever so sweetly. Now He's playing the flute and you are listening to the sweet sound. Now He's coming towards you. You can go on and on like this. This is called meditation on the pastimes and the form of God. It is called Rup Dhyan. The philosophy that I am expounding has the mind as the main matter behind Sankirtan. Those of you who have been listening to the series of discourses, because the mind is the main matter behind Sankirtan, reason being because the mind is the only doer. It is the performer of all our actions. It is responsible for our actions, and that is why it is the cause of bondage as well as liberation. So it is our mind that we must attach and surrender to God. And if we practice devotion in the way I just described, our mind will gradually become concentrated. Your mind will start becoming attached to Him. Then tears will automatically come. Selfless tears will purify our heart. The more tears you shed, the more love you will attain of Shri Krishna. And one day, the heart will become completely purified. And at that moment, then we will not be able to live without Him for even a moment. And at that moment, our Guru will bestow His causeless, His infinite grace on us, attaining which we will attain unlimited divine bliss, divine love, and divine knowledge, and become eternally satisfied. Then Maya can never take hold of us. So with these words, I would like to conclude this series of talks on the philosophy of divine love, as the knowledge has been revealed by none other than Jagat Guru Tam Shri Kripaluji Maharaj. I hope I was of some help to you in your path of devotion.
बोलिए अलबेली सरकार की जय, लाडली लाल की जय, श्री राघवेंद्र सरकार की जय, श्रीमद् सतगुरु सरकार की जय। जय जय श्री राधे, जय जय श्री राधे, जय